I love opening levels. They're something I've always had a fascination with, as they're often the most important part of a game. A good opening level will establish the core mechanics, central gameplay loops, and give the player an insight into what's to come. It's for this reason that a great opening level is seamless and invisible, and doesn't just feel like an interactive manual. Opening levels don't necessarily have to be tutorials either. They can work with them or even be one and the same, but the two aren't mutually inclusive. These levels can be what sells the player on the rest of the game and gets them hooked, or could put them off the entire experience, as people use them to determine whether or not they enjoy the kind of gameplay featured in the rest of the title. This is why it's so important to have a polished and refined initial challenge, one that's an accurate reflection of the rest of the experience. This first impression will draw a player into the game, or leave them uninterested, causing them to put down the game indefinitely. This is what makes me so interested in this element of game design, because it's so fundamental to the player's experience, and at times, a game's success altogether. There are so many great examples of opening levels and initial challenges that span many different genres. There's the Frigate Orpheon from Metroid Prime, the Undead Asylum from Dark Souls, the Griffin Hunt from Witcher 3, or the Cascade Kingdom from Mario Odyssey, which I talked about in a previous video. Though one that's pretty impeccable, and whose excellence is often overlooked, is the opening of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and more specifically, the Great Deku Tree. This is the first of 9 dungeons in the game, and your first interaction with how they work, from its overall structure to the smaller mechanics that you'll see more of as you progress through the whole experience. This dungeon also precedes the very first instance of gameplay, the Kokiri Forest, which is often classed as the tutorial for this game, letting you learn to control Link in a safe environment, giving you plenty of room to play around, obstacles to overcome, and room to explore. The Kokiri Forest introduces basic elements like movement and the characteristics of the overworld, while the Great Deku Tree gives you a bit more challenge while introducing what to expect in dungeons, and how to approach combat. A safe introduction, followed by a bit of challenge, are the core fundamentals of any good video game opening, and a way to ensure the player really understands how the gameplay works. What's more is that these two areas reflect the two distinct parts of gameplay that you'll be experiencing for the rest of the title, be it talking to people for information, or overcoming puzzles in a later dungeon. But for this video, I want to talk about the Great Deku Tree, and what makes it such an excellent introduction. Now, on a surface level, the Deku Tree introduces common elements seen in dungeons, like the map, the compass, a treasure item that opens up more of the dungeon, and a boss, which tests your mastery on said treasure item. But there's actually a lot of depth within this dungeon that teaches you a lot about what to expect throughout the rest of Ocarina of Time. So let's get a bit more specific. There are 2 objectives of the Deku Tree as an opening level: to teach you about how combat works, and to teach you about problem solving. Combat entails challenging you on core aspects of Zelda combat that you need to have a good grip on, like L targeting and enemy patterns, while problem solving teaches you all about how to approach obstacles and puzzles, and having an open mind. Let's begin with combat. An imperative core mechanic within Ocarina of Time's combat is targeting, using the L trigger to lock on enemies. It's an essential tool that you'll need for the rest of the game. At this point in time, this feature was a first for the series, and for most video games altogether, as this game was the very first fully 3D Zelda game. Combat isn't the most precise thing in the world, and L targeting is a way to ensure the player's input goes towards their intended target. It also makes for fluid swapping between equipment while in combat, without having to worry about a change in perspective. It's not a perfect system, but for the time it was pretty revolutionary, and for this game, ensuring the player understands how to use the mechanic is essential. The Kokiri Forest introduces you to targeting by having you lock onto other villagers, but it's not until you head to the Great Deku Tree that it's made clear how fundamental this mechanic really is. If you ignored any instructions and any preceding advice from Navi, the enemies you face will be considerably harder, as you have less precision. But this is actually a subtle and intentional way of getting you to use targeting. Having enemies be relatively easy while using this mechanic, while extremely difficult without it, means that sooner or later you're going to figure out that this tool is an important mechanic that's going to make your life much easier. Ensuring that you're comfortable with this essential element of combat before you embark on your adventure. So this is all well and good, but the Deku Tree takes this a step further by also exposing you to different kinds of enemies and their patterns. All the enemies in this dungeon have slightly different behaviors and means of defeating them. One of the most prominent examples being Skulltulas, which are designed to teach you about patience and timing. There's a significant amount of enemies in Ocarina of Time that are all about timing and waiting for the right moment, like when fighting a Stelphos in various later dungeons. I do think this design choice works against the game in a lot of ways, as it can make combat slow regardless of how skilled you are. But either way, it's still a core component of the game, which the Deku Tree aims to teach you about. After you reach the top of the first area, you'll find 3 Skulltulas guarding the ledges you need to pass through. Considering some of the previous enemies, Deku Babas, are pretty easily defeated, new players who are a bit too aggressive will get punished. It's not until they stop and wait that they'll see the Skulltula turning around, exposing its weakness. This clearly defined window to attack teaches you that some enemies require patience and waiting for the right moment, and the same approach doesn't work in every scenario. Later on, there's even an instance where a Skulltula exposes its weak point first, allowing you to get a quick swing in, assuming you understand how the enemy works by now. By the end of the dungeon, you've been exposed to a variety of enemies with different behaviors and different ways of beating them, giving you an understanding of how different enemies behave, and in conjunction with the lock-on feature, how to properly tackle them. Zelda combat has come a long way since Ocarina of Time, but even today, this level does a great job of teaching you all about those fundamentals. With that, let's move on from combat and talk about problem solving. Problem solving, like puzzles and thinking outside the box, is the basis of any dungeon in Ocarina of Time. These obstacles are often comprised of macro objectives, like healing the Great Deku Tree, populated by micro objectives, ranging from finding a key to open a door, all the way to defeating the boss. It's through these micro objectives and puzzles that the Great Deku Tree teaches you not only what to expect in a dungeon, but also, more importantly, how to learn. Since there are many dungeons throughout the game, each with its own aesthetic, puzzles, and mechanics you need to adapt to, it's far more important that the first dungeon teaches you about the process of problem solving and how to approach obstacles, opposed to just teaching you about a few mechanics. So how does the Deku Tree go about this? Well, by presenting you with a variety of obstacles and allowing you to figure out the solution. And these obstacles are each tied to a mechanic that the level is trying to teach you about. I want to use one of my favorite examples to illustrate my point: the shield. Dungeons often integrate elements acquired from the surrounding area or before the dungeon. Dodongo's Cavern makes use of bomb flowers, the Forest Temple uses the hook shot, and the Water Temple uses the iron boots. The Deku Tree sets up this theme that's continued with later dungeons in the form of the shield, which is acquired in the Kokiri Forest, along with the sword, but doesn't have an actual use until you get to the next area. The sword and combat I covered earlier, but the dungeon has an interesting way of teaching you the necessity of the shield and also how to use it. The instance is in this room right here, where a Deku Scrub bombards you with Deku Seeds, but hides when you get close enough to attack. The solution is to use your shield to deflect seeds right back at the Deku Scrub. This challenge, while simple, has a decent bit of depth. Firstly, it lets you know that brute forcing your way through challenges isn't always going to work, and forces you to evaluate your resources and find an alternative to your sword. Also, given that the shield is an important item for the rest of your playthrough, this is a quintessential way of ensuring that you know this core mechanic of the game through an inconspicuous means, because it requires you to do some thinking on your own. Even for those who might have a bit of trouble, Navi tells you that you can deflect the Deku Seeds right back at the Deku Scrub, which is a great way of getting the player thinking without the risk of letting them get too lost, which is surprisingly subtle for Navi. This thinking outside the box approach is present in a variety of other challenges in this dungeon, but for now let's continue with the shield. This particular obstacle is presented twice more. Once in a slightly smaller room, to ensure you've got your head around how this obstacle works, and one final time before the boss, where you have 3 Deku Scrubs and must reflect the seeds in a specific order, now requiring you to not only be able to hold up the shield, but also aim it around and dodge the bombardment of Deku Seeds. And it's safe to say by the end of it, you'll definitely be comfortable using your shield. The process of introducing a mechanic simply and gradually making things more difficult is fundamental for almost all mechanics seen in Zelda dungeons, and just level design in general. What's fantastic about this one, and a core component of many challenges like it, is in how it's presented, halting your progress and requiring you to figure it out on your own. How to problem solve is what the Deku Tree is trying to teach you about dungeons, which makes encounters like this one all the more satisfying. Okay, let's briefly move on to another example to further illustrate this point. A resource you would have undoubtedly gotten by now are Deku Sticks, either from the store in the Kokiri Forest, or from various enemies in the dungeon. An item that hasn't had a whole lot of use until you reach this room. Now, this area just features a simple platforming challenge to get the compass and a gold skulltula. The real challenge is getting out, as the door locks behind you after you enter. After wandering around for a bit, you'll find that the solution is to light the unlit torch by using a Deku Stick. An obstacle that seems extremely obvious in retrospect, but when encountering it, can be pretty inconspicuous for someone not familiar with puzzles in a dungeon. In the same vein as the last challenge, this room presents you with a micro objective, getting out of the room, and leaves things up to you to figure out how exactly to do it, which usually requires searching through your equipment and racking your brain a bit. The designers also included some Deku Barbers in the room, which will drop Deku Sticks when defeated, just for the minuscule chance that you didn't pick any up. The primary objective of this challenge, apart from problem solving, is also to establish a theme and then continue to expand upon it, gradually increasing the challenge in different ways. Before one final challenge, which requires a bit of thinking outside the box, by rolling across the floor with a stick to burn some cobweb blocking the next area, requiring that open-minded and resourceful thinking featured in other puzzles in this dungeon. The Deku Tree does a quintessential job at teaching you about what to expect in a dungeon, but more importantly, the fundamentals of combat and how to problem solve. It teaches you how enemies work and how they can vary, and ensures you're not beginning your adventure without a good grip on how combat works. It also presents a variety of obstacles and puzzles, as the real objective is to expose you to challenges and teach you how to learn. The goal isn't just to introduce you to the shield or fire or any specific mechanic, even though these mechanics do get expanded upon later in the game, like when using arrows to light torches, and then again with Din's fire, but instead how to think outside the box and how to approach obstacles with an open mind. My favorite obstacle in this dungeon has to be the realization that you need to jump from the top of the first area and break through the cobweb way down at the bottom, as it requires you to think a bit and understand the environment as a whole, the core theme of a lot of challenges and dungeons throughout Ocarina of Time. In the following dungeons, if you get stuck, there's often something you've overlooked, or an item you haven't considered using yet. Like later on in the Fire Temple, when you have to use a bomb to activate a switch you can't quite reach. It's for this reason that I love watching others play through this dungeon and Ocarina of Time, racking their brain for the solutions and the eureka moment of figuring out what to do. This bleeds into the overworld too, with some moments that really require that outside of the box thinking, like shooting the sun to get the fire arrows. It's an organic way of showing you how to problem solve, teaching you the fundamentals, and introducing you to what's to come. These are elements that I'd love to see more in opening levels. Introducing you to mechanics and giving you the right mindset through an inconspicuous method. Respecting the player's intelligence and trusting them to find a solution is always going to make for a more satisfying opening level, compared to a level that relies on telling you what to do. So, if you ever find yourself designing an opening level, think about a subtle, respectful, and challenging way of teaching the player about the fundamentals and how to approach obstacles later in the game. I'm PrimeHylian, and thanks for watching.